Saddam Hussein. It's been 2 decades since he died, but his name is still a total paradox. For some, he was this visionary leader who built a modern Iraq. For others, a monster who ruled with an absolute iron fist. His story is just wild, an orphan who climbs to the very peak of power only to have it all come crashing down. It's a story of creation and destruction, all rolled into one.
So what was he? A hero who built a nation from the ground up, or a tyrant who ruled through pure fear? That's really the central question of his entire life, and, believe me, the answer is not simple at all. You see, it all depends on who you talk to. You get two completely different stories. On one hand, he's the guy who dragged Iraq, kicking and screaming, into the 20th century. But on the other hand, he's this ruthless, brutal dictator. So how can one man be both of those things? Well, to figure that out, we have to go right back to the beginning. Saddam's story starts in this tiny Iraqi village. He was born into a life that was just incredibly hard. His father died before he was even born, and his childhood was just filled with violence and abuse. And that harsh reality, it's what forged the man he would eventually become. This one story from his childhood, it really tells you everything. As an orphan, he was an easy target. Kids were always picking on him. But instead of cowering, he started carrying a steel rod, and he used it. Right from the start, fear wasn't something he felt. It was a weapon, a tool he learned how to wield.
And that early ruthlessness, it fueled this just incredibly rapid rise to power. At just 10 years old, he runs away from his abusive home. He joins the Ba'ath Party thanks to his uncle. Then, by 24, he's leading a failed assassination attempt on the prime minister. It didn't work, but it definitely made him a name to watch. And then, just 8 years later, at 32, he's the second most powerful man in all of Iraq.
Okay, so with all this power, this is where the hero part of the story really kicks in. He had this vision to completely transform Iraq from, a developing nation into a modern, wealthy, and totally independent country, a real symbol of power in the Arab world.
His first big move, and maybe his smartest, was to take back control of Iraq's most valuable asset, its oil. He nationalized the entire industry, basically wresting it away from British companies. And then, when the 1973 oil crisis hit and prices went through the roof, Iraq's treasury was just overflowing with cash.
Get this. At its peak, one single Iraqi dinar was worth $3. That wasn't just a number on a spreadsheet, it was a powerful symbol of national pride and economic muscle.
So what did he do with all that money? He poured it right back into building the country. He created this modern state with free healthcare for everybody and free education all the way through university. He launched a campaign that pretty much wiped out illiteracy and brought electricity to even the most remote villages. So for a lot of Iraqis, and for much of the Arab world, he wasn't just a leader, he was a genuine hero.
But it's right here, at the absolute peak of his popularity, that the story takes this dark and kind of cinematic turn. Because while he was busy building his country, he was also building a cult of personality and an empire of fear. And his inspiration, bizarrely enough, came straight from Hollywood. He became obsessed with The Godfather. It wasn't just a movie he liked, it became his personal blueprint for how to wield power. He started copying the persona, everything from the style of his hat to the way he'd smoke a cigar, modeling himself after the mafia boss in the film. Just 6 days after becoming president in 1979, he puts on this chilling performance straight out of a movie. He calls a big meeting of the party leadership, calmly lights up a cigar, and says there's a conspiracy in the room. Then he starts reading a list of names, supposed traitors, who are dragged out one by one. 68 members were removed. Many were shot right on the spot. With that one televised act, he got rid of all his rivals and made it crystal clear he would rule through absolute terror.
So, at the very peak of his power, Saddam makes his first catastrophic mistake. He was terrified of the new leader in Iran, Ayatollah Khomeini, and the influence he might have on Iraq's Shia population. He saw Khomeini as a massive threat to his power. So, with some backing from other countries, he invaded.
The war was an absolute disaster. It dragged on for 8 brutal years. Over 1 million people were killed. And that nation that was once so incredibly rich, now was drowning in billions and billions of dollars of debt? Saddam gained nothing and lost almost everything.
So now he's desperate, he's broke, and he makes his second and final huge mistake. It was this massive gamble to try and get his power and wealth back, but it ended up triggering a chain of events that led to his complete and total destruction.
Feeling like Kuwait was cheating him on oil prices and wasn't helping with his war debts, Saddam did the unthinkable. He invaded his tiny oil-rich neighbor. And his army? It conquered the entire country in just 2 days. For a second there, he was the most feared leader in the Arab world. But it was a fatal mistake.
The world's reaction was swift and it was overwhelming. A US-led coalition came in and drove his army right out of Kuwait. But the real damage came after that, crippling sanctions from the United Nations. And these weren't just political. They absolutely strangled the Iraqi economy, leading to mass poverty for the very same people he had once lifted up. It just devastated the nation he had worked so hard to build.
With his country choked by sanctions and his power fading, the ultimate blow didn't come from a foreign enemy. It came from inside his own inner circle. The betrayal came from his own sons-in-law.
The husbands of his 2 daughters, who were both high-ranking officials, fled Iraq, and they started spilling all of his secrets to the world, including details about his weapons programs. So in a classic Godfather move, Saddam sends them a message. Come back, bring my daughters home, and I promise all will be forgiven. And they fell for it. They actually believed him. As soon as their plane touched down in Iraq, Saddam forced them to divorce his daughters. A few hours later, they were both dead, reportedly executed by Saddam's own son, Uday. The message was brutal and clear. No one, not even family, was safe.
Well, the secrets those men revealed, that was basically the justification needed for the final act. The 2003 U.S. invasion of Iraq marked the beginning of the end for Saddam, a fall from power that was as swift as it was dramatic.
The collapse was just total. The invasion toppled his entire regime in just 1 month. His sons, Uday and Qusay, died in a firefight. Then, after months on the run, Saddam himself was captured. His trial was this global spectacle on TV, and it ended with a death sentence. In 2006, he was hanged.
I mean, the sheer scale of his fall is just perfectly captured in this one contrast. At his trial, he defiantly tells the judge, "I am Saddam Hussein, president of Iraq." But just months before that, this same man was being pulled out of a hole in the ground, looking completely defeated. The contrast is just unbelievable.
And in the end, getting rid of him didn't bring the peace everyone hoped for. The power vacuum he left behind plunged Iraq into years and years of chaos and conflict. So we come back to that first question. Was he a hero or a tyrant? A builder or a destroyer? Maybe the real verdict is that he was both. And the tragedy is that Iraq is still living with the consequences of it all.